Today we're going to talk a little bit about generating sales appointments from news reports. And we talk a lot about sales appointments, and this isn't designed to replace what we've talked about in the past, but more so to complement the strategies that we've discussed. And so news is really a very powerful sales generating tool, probably one of the better ones that I can think of. And I'm sure that most of you probably use news to some extent to generate appointments, and today's topic isn't necessarily to introduce it rather than to refine it and help you basically gain additional insights on how you can leverage news. Now, when you don't receive responses to emails, and a lot of the appointment setting that we do is through emails, it's usually because we're missing one of these three ingredients. One of which is timing, the next is relevancy, and the last of which is custom content. So no matter how good your products and services are, if the timing is off, it will never really function for you. And that's why timing is so important, especially within the technology industry. We have very small windows of opportunities for almost everything that we do. In addition, relevant emails usually get answered because your audience has such a high threshold for their attention span. It's so high that if anything isn't extremely relevant, they really don't pay attention to it. And then the third piece is custom. So if you have the two first ingredients right and the email feels like a bulk email, then chances are people are going to ignore it. So that's kind of tied to the number two piece, which is relevancy. But when the email feels customized to that individual, then you're usually going to get a much better response rate. And so the idea behind this is you really want to have emails for an audience of one. Otherwise, if you go above that, it's going to be much harder to get a response rate from your audience. So what we're going to talk about over the next 5 to 10 minutes is how news reports can help us achieve all three of these elements in getting both responses and sales appointments. If you guys remember from a few calls in the past, we had a great call with Stu Heineke, who's really the expert on getting sales appointments with just about anyone. And in the call, he shared a case study of a sales consultant who basically generated sales appointments using news reports, kind of what we're talking about today. And what this gentleman did was he waited for news reports about companies who were struggling, having sales that were failing, or some type of aspects of the company where things weren't going well. And so what he would do is he would go out and purchase a custom $1,000 sword and mail it to the decision maker within the company and let them know that he's willing to fight for them in getting their business back on track. Now, we're not suggesting that we need to go out and buy a sword, but what this is it kind of helps illustrate how some people use news reports to generate sales appointments. And looking at companies that are struggling, and news reports that highlight that is one of the many angles that we'll talk about today. Now, before we get started, I'm sure all of you are already familiar with this, but I just wanted to highlight real briefly how you can generate news reports for your company. Essentially, Google Alerts is probably your best bet if you're not using Ensable, so this would be a free resource. Ensable does provide news reports as part of our daily Pareto report, which highlights about two dozen different alerts about different companies. But this is great because anyone can set this up. So when you're setting up a news report inside of Google Alerts, you want to use in title, colon, and then quotation marks around the company. What this does is it asks Google to only provide you news reports around companies where the company that you're following shows up in the title, which helps make the content much more relevant, and you get rid of a lot of the false positives that may come across your plate. So again, google.com/alerts, in title, colon, and then the company name in quotation marks, and this will make it a lot easier to get relevant content and real-time news reports. Now, what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is just go through a few case studies. And so what I did is I went out and pulled at random a number of news articles that have come across the wire. And these we're going to use as basically a way to illustrate how to capitalize on these different news reports and how to really gain traction with them. So most of us, I think, would qualify as an alumni of some type of a school, whether it's a college, high school, middle school, and even your elementary school. But essentially, if you have that personal connection to one of those schools, it's kind of your responsibility to give back to those that have helped you. Keeping tabs on these organizations will help inform you about sales opportunities where you can help. So in this example, NWIC has just received a grant. And so this would be an ideal opportunity to reach out to the school and help them from a technology standpoint in executing that grant and basically helping them implement that. And so following companies or organizations who you have a personal connection to is a great place to start, especially within the educational industry. Now, if you come across a news article for a company that you need contacts for, so maybe you need to refresh or you just don't have anybody, you can run a free upsell report. And I'll show you how to do that here in just a second. The upsell report will have a section which highlights all of the contacts that we've been able to identify at the company, including email addresses, titles, location, and DIDs. So the upsell report will be available. It's upsellreport.com. And another tidbit that you should consider is when you're emailing companies, it's always important to CC another individual at the company. What we found is if you copy someone else at the company, you get a 4 times higher response rate. And so essentially you would just choose 2 contacts that you think would be ideal, copy the second one using CC, and it feels a little bit more real. Mainly because bulk email systems, kind of like what we talked about in the very beginning, are incapable of CCing anyone on an email and helps it feel more customized. So to access the upsell report, again, it's just upsellreport.com. It's totally free. Just put in the website, and it'll email you an HTML doc that highlights all the data about the company. So getting back to our case studies, this is another one that's really interesting. As you come across different news articles, you'll find that each one has what we call a ripple effect. In this example, the hospital was recently closed. And so obviously there's not much we can do with the hospital that was closed, but there is a great opportunity to create conversations with the neighboring hospitals and clinics to figure out how they're going to handle the increased traffic. Essentially, it's a segue or an excuse to say, look, your biggest competitor just closed. This is obviously going to affect your business. Let's talk about this. And so it's a great conversation starter, but this is an opportunity to look at the ripple effects of every single news article that you come across, and we'll talk about a few of the other types of ripple effects that we see. But these are the types of things that are coming across the newswire every day. This is another great example of how powerful news reports can be. We've talked a lot about insight selling, specifically across all the different calls that we've talked about, really because it's one of the most powerful sales mechanisms out there. And some have struggled to come up with your own insights. So following research companies like Inmar Analytics will help provide a regular and timely feed of insights you can use to generate sales appointments. So basically, if you don't want to create your own insights for generating sales appointments, you can follow companies who generate their own insights and use those. That's basically an information source. So in this article, Inmar Analytics has discovered major shifts taking place within the last 6 months in the coupon market. So the shift to digital coupons has become more prominent, and the need to implement digital coupons is essential for the survival of both grocery stores and those who are accepting and creating the coupons. So if you were to formulate a plan to help these organizations transition to a digital coupon model or platform, it would be pretty easy to earn their respect and attention to help them implement this. It would be also ideal to even partner with Inmar Analytics to find ways to help their work become reality across their different clients that they're helping consult with. And so essentially there's lots of different ripple effects here, but one is you get timely insights that someone else is generating for you, which you can take and use to generate appointments with prospects. But you can also partner with the companies that are generating the insights and help them implement them across their partners. We also find there's a lot of news from an economic development standpoint. Cities and states really love to brag about these local wins because they're all competing for new business and lots of opportunities. You know, we've seen the effect that Google and Amazon has had on different local communities and competing for their business. And so these are great opportunities to look for opportunities. So like the previous article, we can create a multiplier effect by not only securing the business directly from the opportunity, so that this is the company that they're talking about in the specific article, but also creating a long-term referral partner. So the article details basically that Heartland Payment Systems will be moving to Oklahoma City. They're going to build a 7-story building and bring 345 new local jobs. This would be a gold mine for any of us as a sales consultant to help that new organization implement all the technology services that they're going to need. But before we would actually reach out to Heartland Payment Systems, our first phone call should really be to the City Council. The reason being, as we discussed in our lead exchange call a few months ago, we want to create a complementary referral network system. And this is really essential to scaling our virtual sales team. So the call to the City Council really will first of all, congratulate them on the recent win. But we want to ask them, do you have funds and resources to do similar deals with other companies? And the obvious answer is going to be yes. We want to bring more companies to the market. And so essentially, you're going to be able to use their money and their resources to attract other businesses to replicate what they just did with Heartland Payment Systems. And so if they give you the green light to be an informal representative to go out and recruit companies, you essentially start to create this referral relationship with the City Council. And so you can also, because you're creating this two-way relationship, you can also say, look, what I'm interested in is helping these companies implement their technology services. So I can cover that for you, but I also want to bring these companies and make this a win-win relationship for both of us, which is essentially what the lead exchange model does for you. And so when you're looking at these articles, keep in mind that the end goal here is not necessarily just to work with Heartland Payment Systems, but it's ultimately to create a referral relationship with the City Council and to use the money that they've set aside to bring companies to the local market. So again, this is just one example of how you can use these news articles to help grow your business. This article is another great example of how we can exercise some of our creative skills to generate massive referral partner opportunities. So again, referral partners are really, we want that ongoing referral relationship. And so a lot of these news articles, which were pulled at random, really illustrate ways where we can create referral partners. So the World Insurance Associates is a new program that was developed by the government. It essentially creates a safety net for building development. So when companies build, when real estate companies develop new commercial real estate buildings, it's basically an insurance program to guarantee that they'll get a return on their investments. And so because this is a new program and there's a new opportunity here, this is really a gold mine for sales opportunities because, as you know, all commercial buildings need affordable bandwidth options in order to be sustainable. And so your job would help basically fulfill that gap in helping them source that and bring in different fiber options and bring in the best basically bandwidth solutions for those different buildings. And so partnering with companies like World Insurance Associates would provide an ideal opportunity to help them fulfill what they're already trying to do. This is also another interesting article that we came across, and there's a lot of this activity taking place within the restaurant business. We know that the Doordash platforms are becoming more and more popular. And so what's interesting about this is the retail space is also dealing a lot with PCI compliancy and security. And because Doordash and all these different restaurants are exchanging a lot of money on a regular basis, these integrations usually are above the pay scale or the skill sets of these local restaurants. And so becoming an expert in that area and understanding these integrations well enough, you can really create an ongoing sales pipeline by just keeping track of which companies are integrating with these third-party delivery services and using that to essentially say, look, I'm an expert in making this work. Let me at least review what you've done and create that relationship with these companies. So again, capitalizing on that event and making sure that they've been safeguarded. And ultimately, I'm sure if you would develop your skill set enough, you would be able to work directly with these third-party organizations like DoorDash in order to help them and create a referral relationship with them as well. Also, this is probably one of my favorite areas to focus on. But when you think about the products and services that we sell, they're almost always directly or indirectly related to other technologies. So whether we're selling IT security, phone systems, bandwidth, SD-WAN, all of it's really interconnected with other technologies. And so even if we are selling a single platform or a single product or service, we still need to be aware of the other products and technologies that our prospects and customers are using, because they're interconnected and dependent on each other. So when changes take place across the vendors and technology platforms that our prospects and customers are using, we really need to be aware of that. And so we'll oftentimes see that the vendors that our prospects are using are being acquired, or they're merging, or there's a product upgrade, or there's an integration. And so if we can stay aware of these types of opportunities, which basically show up in the news, we can be proactive with our prospects, which is one of the most powerful sales tools that we have. Proactively guiding these prospects and customers through vendor changes helps provide tremendous value and credibility for who we are and what we do. So these timing elements are essential in keeping track of these vendors and what's going on, and will empower you to be proactive and basically successful with all of your business relationships. And so basically what you're doing is you're saying, look, your vendor just got acquired. Let me tell you what this is probably going to translate for you in your business. Or this is how it's going to affect the technology that we're using. And you can also keep track of this if you're looking at your daily Pareto reports from Enable. There's a vendor update section that talks about outages, upgrades, acquisitions, and any new integrations taking place across the applications and services and vendors that your customers are using. And if you're not sure which technologies your customers are using, that is, again, provided in the free upsell report in the technology overview section, which basically highlights all the technology and platforms that your customers are using. And you can take those different keywords and plug those in to the tracking mechanism to make sure that you're staying on top of those different vendors and using those as excuses to be proactive with your customers. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, we can talk about that in the Q&A afterwards. Oftentimes, we'll also come across news articles highlighting recent achievements and awards. I really like this strategy because it really has a good motivator behind it. The best strategy for these types of news reports is actually to engage with the prospects and competitors. This is something that we covered in a previous training about selling to your customers' competitors, and you can review that, and we'll talk briefly about how to look that up. But basically, if you reach out to the competitors of Wheless partners and let them know that their competitor just won this prestigious award, if you understand their business well enough and how your products can help their business grow and scale and improve, then you can talk about a strategy in helping them achieve the same award. And usually, when people miss out on these types of awards or achievements, it's usually a pretty good motivator to get them to actually change. And you'll find in the upsell report there's a section called Related Companies. This is basically the competitors or companies that know the companies that you're talking to. So you would plug in Wheless Partners into the upsell report, and then he would have a list of all of the companies that are related to them, and you could share this information about how they missed out on this award and use that as a motivating factor to get them to actually implement something new or do something different. This is another great example of how amazing the information that comes across the newswire. Again, this is just one of the random articles that we've pulled up, but basically this is spelling out that this new recovery center is expanding into a large office building. And so this would be another great trigger to engage with them and talk to them about their strategy there. Another great news report is, again, going back to these cities. The city of Vancouver is essentially has set the goal to become the greenest city in the world. And so what this signals is major change taking place. And we know that a lot of data centers have a pretty large footprint when it comes to pollution, and doesn't always work that great. There's a lot of great technologies nowadays that would help companies or cities like Vancouver achieve their goals of becoming a green city. And so this article signals that there's going to be major change taking place. And if you understand which vendors can help them in providing green technology and offer green types of services, this would be a valuable asset for them. Also, as we talked a little bit earlier, when it comes to vendors, almost everything we do, everything we sell, is a means to an end. The technology that it either has one of two purposes. It's either designed to secure or optimize access to some type of an application. So when you see companies like Pythian who are launching a software application, especially in the Saas space, this should be a major signal for you, because in order for these applications to function properly, they're going to need some type of a consultant or expert who can help them optimize and secure access to those applications. And so when you see articles like this, this is one of those ideal moments where you can come in and create a really powerful referral relationship and work with their customers in optimizing access to those applications. You also notice a lot of articles that highlight basically decision maker changes. And what's interesting about this is that 60% of an individual budget is typically spent within the first 6 months. And so using this as a signal is a good opportunity to reach out and help these new members essentially implement their strategies and help them accomplish that, and basically help them spend their money. Also see that companies like to highlight their success. And this is something that when companies are successful in expanding, it's something that they'll typically highlight. And these are the ideal types of companies because they're almost like a referral partner, because they're going to constantly come to you for new opportunities and sales opportunities. And although Jiffy Lube would be a big target, if you go back to the call that we did on how to penetrate companies using internal referrals, you'll find some pretty good strategies there on how to get into the decision makers for fairly large organizations like Jiffy Lube. Another common flavor of news reports involves partnerships. Companies love to announce partnerships, and partnerships require integrations. And this particular news article actually talks about 2 banks that are going to start working together. And banks will obviously require special security integration. And if you specialize in bank security, it'll be easy to convince them to make sure that they're covering all of the areas that they need to in regards to safeguarding their security, especially since they're basically creating a link between the 2 organizations. And that's typically what you're going to look at when it comes to partnerships. There needs to be some type of a connection between the 2, and helping implement and create that is a great door opener. Also, it seems like lately there's a lot of leaked information all across the board. And this specific article highlights the fact that some documents were leaked. And again, this is a great opportunity to say, look, we need to look at how your security permissions are set up internally. If information is being leaked, it's a great opportunity to highlight the need for that, and creates a great sales opportunity related to that. Also, believe it or not, a lot of companies by third parties are basically, when they are hacked or affected, it usually shows up in the news. I think I did a search yesterday, and I found about 30 examples of this, just doing a brief search. But there's tons of opportunities where companies are being highlighted where they're being affected. Now, what's great about this is when it comes to selling IT security, it's really not relevant to the companies that we're talking to until they know someone that was affected. And so again, what you want to do here is you would run an upsell report on Reliable Respiratory and figure out which companies are related to them and inform them about the hack. And at that point, it would be much easier to implement an IT security solution that can help avoid this tragedy in the future. So I think that's enough case studies to really help everyone kind of understand how to leverage news articles to grow your business. The biggest things that we want to take away from today's call is timing. News articles are real-time information about changes taking place, and only changes it's only when companies are changing that we have a window of sales windows for selling at new opportunities. Also, we want to make sure that you're tracking vendors, keeping track of outages, acquisitions, integrations, knowing what's happening within the vendors of your customers and prospects is one of the most powerful ways to demonstrate both your credibility and value to the vendors themselves. And also remember to look at the multiple angles and opportunities, kind of like what we were talking about with the Oklahoma City example. It's not just talking to the company that's moving into the city, but creating referral relationships with these companies and understand the true ramifications of what's happening within the article. And ultimately, you have to know what you're doing. Going back to the example of Doordash, if you don't really know how to create a PCI compliant integration and to safeguard that new third-party vendor relationship, then you're not really going to be able to create a sales appointment or any type of value or credibility with these companies. And so you really need to specialize in whatever's going on within that business, kind of like what we talked about with the banking world when the two banks were trying to integrate with each other and to create a formal relationship. You can't really have the opportunity to generate a sales appointment if you can't help them. So that's everything for today. If you have any questions,